Be me, Daniel, 30, working nights as a hotel maintenance supervisor, not glamorous. Mostly broken air conditioners, leaking sinks, jammed doors, flickering hallway lights, and guests who think urgent means the TV remote needs new batteries. I walk around with a radio clipped to my belt, a ring of keys heavy enough to qualify as a weapon, and a small flashlight I use more than my phone. My job is fixing problems nobody notices until they stop being fixed. When everything works, nobody thinks about me. When one thing breaks, suddenly I'm the most important person in the building. I got used to that rhythm, quiet work, practical work. No applause, just a checklist, a toolbox, and the satisfaction of leaving a room better than I found it. That was how I preferred life. Steady, low noise, no unnecessary drama. Then I met Sienna. She was 28, worked as a brand consultant, and had the kind of presence that made people look twice before they knew why. Not conventionally soft, more sharp, elegant, controlled. She dressed like every outfit had a thesis statement. She spoke with this calm certainty, like she had already judged the room and found it slightly disappointing. We met at the hotel. She was there for a women's leadership conference, one of those events with velvet banners, motivational panels, and gift bags full of skincare samples. The projector in one of the meeting rooms died 20 minutes before a keynote. Front desk called me in a panic. I went down, opened the ceiling panel, traced the cable issue, swapped the adapter, and got everything running with about 3 minutes to spare. Sienna was coordinating the panel. She watched me work without saying much. After the screen came back to life, she said, "You just saved 40 professional women from collectively blaming the patriarchy for a V failure." I laughed. I couldn't help it. She smiled. That was how it started. She found me later near the service hallway and asked if the hotel always depended on one calm man with a screwdriver. I said, usually it's two calm men, but the other one called in sick. She laughed again, quick, bright, a little dangerous. We talked for 10 minutes, then 20. She asked about my work. I asked about hers. She said brands were just stories people agreed to believe. I said hotels were just problems pretending to be comfort. She liked that. Before she left, she gave me her number. The first few months were almost too good. Sienna was intense in a way that made ordinary life feel sharpened. Dinner wasn't just dinner, it was atmosphere. Music wasn't just music, it was emotional architecture. A walk through the city turned into commentary about public space, gender, wealth, desire, loneliness, everything. She had a way of pulling meaning out of things I usually ignored. At first I liked that. My life had been practical for so long that being around someone so verbal, so expressive, felt like standing near a fire after years in fluorescent lighting. She called herself a feminist, not casually. It was central to how she saw herself. She talked about independence, female ambition, unpaid emotional labor, men who benefited from women's softness, men who wanted mothers instead of partners. A lot of it sounded fair. I had no problem with women being independent. My mother raised me after my father disappeared into some new life 2 states away. My older aunt practically ran half our family. I had seen women carry things they should not have had to carry. So when Sienna talked about women being tired, I listened. The problem was that her ideas started as observations and slowly became weapons. At first it was small. If I held a door open, she would smirk and ask if I was performing chivalry or just blocking the entrance. If I paid for dinner, she would say she accepted because reparations for the gender wage gap could begin at the table. If I asked whether she got home safe, she would say, "Careful, Daniel. Protective can become possessive very quickly." But then she would still expect the ride, still expect the dinner, still expect the text. That was the confusing part. She mocked traditional gestures while quietly collecting them. If I didn't do them, I was low effort. If I did them, I was acting out conditioning. There was no clean path, just a narrow hallway lined with critiques. I kept walking it anyway, because when things were good, they were really good. She could be warm, not often enough, but enough to keep me reaching for it. She would show up at my apartment after a long day, kick off her boots, curl against me on the couch, and talk softly like I was the only quiet place she had. She would fall asleep with her hand on my chest. In those moments, I believed we were building something. Then morning would come and the analysis would return. The first time she called me replaceable, it sounded like a joke. We were at brunch with two of her friends, Lila and Morgan. Lila was newly divorced and spoke about marriage like she had escaped a hostage situation. Morgan was single, proud of it, and treated every man in every story like a defective appliance. They were talking about dating apps, specifically how men needed to realize the market had changed. Sienna said, "Men still act like women need them. That's the funniest part." Morgan raised her glass. "Exactly. Replaceable." Sienna looked at me and smiled. "Sorry, babe. No offense." I said, "None taken." That was a lie. She laughed and touched my arm. "You're one of the better ones, but still, men are replaceable by design." Everyone laughed. I smiled politely because that is what you do when you are outnumbered and don't want to ruin brunch. But the phrase stayed with me, replaceable by design. Later that night, I brought it up, not angrily, just carefully. I said, "That thing at brunch, the replaceable comment, did you mean that?" She was taking off her earrings in my bathroom mirror. She didn't even look at me. She said, "I meant men as a class." I said, "You said it while looking at me." She sighed. "Daniel, if you're going to personalize structural critique, we're going to have a problem." There it was, the escape hatch. If her words hurt me, I had misunderstood the theory. I said, "I'm not trying to argue. I just don't think I'd ever call you replaceable in front of my friends." She turned then. "Because women have historically been treated as replaceable, men haven't." I stood there in the doorway, still in my work pants, suddenly exhausted. I said, "So that makes it okay?" She said, "It makes it context." I let it go. That was my pattern. Let it go. Keep the peace. Don't make a small thing big. The problem is, small things don't stay small when they are rewarded with silence. After that, replaceable became one of her favorite words. Not always directed at me, sometimes at men generally, sometimes at exes, sometimes at husbands in movies, sometimes at male coworkers. But always close enough that I could feel the edge. A celebrity got divorced. "Men are replaceable." A friend dumped her boyfriend. "Good. Upgrade season." A guy at the restaurant complained about something. Men really forget there are millions of them. She started sending me videos too. Women explaining that the modern man had to compete not with other men, but with a woman's peace. At first I agreed with the sentence. A bad relationship should lose to peace. That seemed obvious. But Sienna used it differently. She used peace like a threat. If I forgot to call before sleeping after a night shift, she would say, "My peace is expensive, Daniel." If I seemed tired during dinner, she would say, "I don't date men who drain me." If I disagreed with her take on something, she would say, "I need you to understand how easy it is for me to choose myself." Every conflict ended with the same implication: behave correctly or be replaced, and I believed her. That was the humiliating part. I believed I was always one mistake away from being swapped out for some better, taller, richer, more emotionally fluent man who knew all the correct phrases and never got tired, so I tried harder. I adjusted my schedule around hers, even though I worked nights and slept at strange hours. If she wanted dinner at 7, I woke up at 5 after sleeping 4 hours. If she had a bad day, I stayed on the phone in the hotel boiler room while condensation dripped from pipes and my radio kept crackling. If she needed help assembling furniture, I came over after a 12-hour shift and did it. If she wanted space, I gave space. If she felt neglected during space, I apologized for giving too much space. It was like maintaining an old building where every repair caused a leak in another wall. One night I was at work when the main laundry room flooded. A supply line burst behind an industrial washer, water everywhere. Housekeeping panicking. The general manager calling every 5 minutes. I spent 3 hours shutting valves, mopping, moving equipment, and coordinating an emergency plumber. At 2:17 a.m., while kneeling in water with my shoes soaked through, I got a text from Sienna. "Interesting that you haven't checked in tonight." I stared at it, water dripping from my sleeve, radio buzzing on my belt. I typed, Emergency at work, laundry room flooded, been handling it. She replied, okay, I just notice patterns. That sentence made something cold settle in my chest. Patterns. Everything became a pattern when she needed it to. A missed text was not a missed text, it was neglect. A tired voice was not a tired voice, it was emotional withdrawal. A disagreement was not a disagreement, it was resistance to growth. The next morning, after I finally got home, she called. I thought maybe she would ask if I was okay. She didn't. She said she felt deprioritized. I sat on the edge of my bed in wet socks, too tired to even remove them. I said, Sienna, the hotel flooded. She said, and I empathize with that, but emergencies don't erase impact. I remember closing my eyes. Impact. That word again. I said, what impact? She said, the impact of feeling like I have to compete with your job for emotional presence. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, because I had spent the night preventing a commercial laundry room from becoming an indoor pool, and somehow I was still on trial. I apologized again. But something inside me noticed, not loudly, just quietly took a note. She did not ask if I was okay. That note mattered later. The real breaking point happened at her apartment during a dinner she hosted. Just 6 people, Sienna, me, Lila, Morgan, a guy Morgan was seeing named Eric, and Sienna's coworker, Natalie. I had come straight from work after sleeping maybe 3 hours. Sienna wanted me there because, in her words, it matters that my partner can show up socially. So I showed up. I brought wine. I fixed her loose cabinet hinge while she finished cooking because it had been bothering her for weeks. Nobody noticed that except me. Dinner was fine at first. Then the conversation turned to relationships. It always did with that group. Morgan was complaining that Eric had taken too long to define their situation. Eric looked like a man trapped in a deposition. Lila said men only committed when their options dried up. Sienna said, that's why women need to stop treating men like scarce resources. They're not. Morgan nodded. They're abundant and mostly interchangeable. Then Sienna said it, louder than usual. Exactly. A man is only special if he adds value. Otherwise, replace him. Peace is better. She looked at me when she said it, not by accident. Maybe she wanted me to absorb the lesson. Maybe she wanted to remind me of my place. Maybe she thought I would laugh like before. I didn't. I put my fork down, quietly. The table kept moving for half a second, then noticed the shift. I said, do you think I add value? Sienna blinked. What? I repeated. Do you think I add value to your life? She gave a small laugh. Daniel, don't do this here. I said, you brought it here. Her face tightened. The others went quiet. Eric looked at me like I had just stepped on a landmine he had been avoiding for months. Sienna said, of course you add value, but that's not the point. What is the point? The point is that women shouldn't be afraid to choose peace over men. I nodded. I agree. That threw her slightly. I continued. Peace is better than a bad relationship. I completely agree. She relaxed a little, thinking the danger had passed. Then I said, so maybe I should choose peace too. The room went dead, not quiet, dead, like someone had unplugged the air. Sienna stared at me. What is that supposed to mean? I kept my voice level. It means I hear you. Men are replaceable. Peace is better. If a relationship drains you, you leave. I agree with the rule. Her eyes narrowed. You're twisting my words. No, I'm applying them evenly. Morgan scoffed. Classic. Men always weaponize boundaries when women express standards. I looked at her. I fixed the hinge on that cabinet before dinner because Sienna asked me 3 weeks ago, and I finally had the right screwdriver in my bag. I came here after a night shift on 3 hours of sleep. I brought wine. I have listened to all of you call men replaceable for an hour. If the only acceptable response is smiling while being insulted, that's not a boundary. That's a hierarchy. Nobody spoke. Sienna's cheeks flushed deep red. She said very coldly, "If being around empowered women makes you this fragile, maybe you should leave." There it was, the threat, leave. Usually that word would have made me panic. Usually I would have softened, apologized, said I was tired, asked to talk privately. But something about the night was too clear. Maybe it was the lack of sleep. Maybe it was the months of quiet notes stacking up. Maybe it was seeing Eric at the table, eyes down, already trained. I stood up. Sienna looked surprised. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. I said, "Okay." She blinked. "Okay?" "Yeah, I'll leave." Her mouth opened slightly. That was not the expected answer. I turned to the others. "Good night." Then I walked out. No slammed door, no dramatic speech in the hallway, just the elevator down, the lobby lights, the cold air outside, and my truck parked under a street lamp. My hands were shaking when I started the engine, not from anger, from adrenaline, from doing the thing I had been threatened with for months and realizing the world did not end. My phone started buzzing before I got home. Sienna again, then texts. That was humiliating. You made me look abusive in front of my friends. You don't get to storm out and call that maturity. I need space. I looked at the last one and almost smiled. She needed space after I had already left. I didn't respond. I drove home, took a shower, put my wet work clothes in the laundry. Then I sat in my apartment at 1 a.m. listening to nothing. No phone call, no analysis, no accusation, no emotional weather report from Sienna's nervous system. Just the hum of my refrigerator and the distant sound of traffic. For the first time in months, my apartment felt like mine again. That was the first taste of peace, small, almost unfamiliar. The next day, I slept 10 hours. When I woke up, my body felt heavy but clean, like a fever had broken. There were more messages, some angry, some wounded, some written in that careful, therapeutic tone she used when preparing to accuse me of harm. She said I had abandoned her. She said leaving in front of her friends was a power move. She said I had created emotional unsafety in her own home. She said she expected accountability. I read them once, then I put the phone down and made coffee. Not because I didn't care, I did care. That was the problem. I had cared so much that her moods had become the manager of my life. But now there was a new manager, quiet. I liked quiet better. For the next week, I did not chase. I didn't ask when we could talk. I didn't write a long apology. I didn't explain my side in paragraphs. I went to work. I fixed a broken ice machine. I replaced a toilet fill valve in room 406. I helped an elderly guest open a stuck balcony door. I came home, ate simple food, watched old documentaries, slept. I turned off notifications from Sienna, not blocked, muted. There is a difference. Blocking would have been dramatic. Muting was maintenance. The messages slowed, then changed. At first she was outraged, then confused, then soft. Can we not do this? I miss you. I don't like how we left things. I feel like you're punishing me. That one got my attention. Punishing. The word people use when they don't like experiencing the consequences of their own rules. I finally replied, I'm not punishing you. I'm choosing peace. 3 dots appeared immediately, disappeared, appeared again. She wrote, Seriously? I replied, yes. Then I put the phone down. That was when she panicked. Not all at once. It came in waves. First came the practical panic. She asked if we were still together. I said I didn't know. She asked what that meant. I said it meant I was thinking. She said relationships require communication. I said respect does too. Then came the emotional panic. She sent voice notes. In the first one, she cried and said she felt blindsided. In the second, she said she had only been speaking generally about men. In the third, she admitted maybe the jokes had gone too far. In the fourth, she said my silence was triggering abandonment wounds. I listened to each one, not immediately, not with the old urgency. I listened after work, sitting at my kitchen table, drinking water. Her voice sounded different without my fear attached to it. Smaller, less authoritative, more human. But the pattern was still there. Even in apology, the center was her experience. Her humiliation, her fear, her wounds, her need for reassurance. There was very little about what it had felt like to sit beside her for months while she casually reminded me I was replaceable. On Friday, she came to my apartment. She didn't warn me. She just knocked. I opened the door and found her standing there in a long coat, hair perfect, eyes tired. She looked beautiful. That made it harder. Beauty can be its own argument if you're lonely enough. I wasn't lonely that night. I was calm. I let her in. She looked around like she expected to find evidence of collapse. Takeout boxes, empty bottles. Some sign that removing her had damaged the structure. Instead, the apartment was clean, laundry folded, dishes done, a book open on the coffee table. The quiet had been taking care of me. She noticed. I saw it. She sat on the couch. I stayed in the chair across from her. That bothered her too. She said, "You feel far away." I said, "I am." Her eyes filled. "Daniel." Just my name. Old trick. Not intentional maybe, but effective once. Not now. She said she was sorry, not in the formal way, actually sorry. She said she had been careless with her language. She said her friends amplified the worst parts of her. She said she sometimes confused independence with defensiveness. That was the closest she had ever come to self-awareness. I appreciated it. I told her that. Then she reached for my hand. I let her take it for a second. Then I gently pulled mine back. Her face changed. Fear. Real fear. "You don't want me anymore?" I took a breath. "I don't want the relationship we had. We can change it. Maybe you can, but I don't know if I want to be there while you learn." That hurt her. I saw it land. She said, "So I'm just replaceable to you now?" There it was, the reversal. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. I said, "No, Sienna, you're not replaceable." She relaxed for half a second. Then I continued, "But you are removable." The relaxation vanished. I said it calmly, not cruelly. People aren't replaceable. Everyone is specific. You are specific. What we had was specific. But someone being specific doesn't mean they get unlimited access to your peace. She stared at me. I could see her trying to process her own language coming back without the arrogance attached. I said, "You taught me that." A tear rolled down her cheek. She whispered, "I didn't think you'd actually leave." That was the truth. There it was. Not I didn't mean it. Not I was wrong. I didn't think you'd actually leave. The whole system depended on that. She could call me replaceable because she believed I was too attached to act like it. She could threaten peace because she believed I had none without her. She could frame herself as the chooser because she never imagined I might choose too. I leaned forward. "Sienna, that is exactly why I have to." She started crying then. Not loud, not performative. Quiet, frightened tears. She said, "I was trying to make sure I never needed a man." I said, "You succeeded." She looked up. I continued, "You made sure you didn't need me. Then you seemed surprised when I stopped feeling needed." She covered her face. For a while, neither of us said anything. The apartment was still. Outside, a car passed with music thumping faintly through closed windows. Then she asked if there was someone else. I said no. She asked if I was going to start dating immediately. I said no. She asked what I was replacing her with. I looked around my apartment, the folded laundry, the quiet lamp, the half-finished book, the absence of dread in my chest. I said, "This." She followed my eyes. Understanding arrived slowly, then all at once, peace. Not another woman, not revenge, not freedom to act wild, just peace. That devastated her more than jealousy would have. Another woman would have given her a target. Peace gave her nothing to compete with except the environment she had created. She said, barely audible, "I can't compete with that." I said, "You weren't supposed to compete with it. You were supposed to be part of it." That was the moment she broke. She bent forward, crying into her hands. I felt pity, real pity. But pity is not the same as love returning. I had to learn that. You can feel compassion for someone and still not hand them the keys again. When she calmed down, I told her I wanted to end it, clearly. No pause, no vague space, no maybe. She nodded like she had heard me from underwater. She asked if we could talk again someday. I said maybe, but not soon. She stood at the door for a long time before leaving. I think she expected me to hug her. I didn't. Not because I wanted to be cruel, because I knew her body would feel familiar, and familiar can impersonate right. She left. I closed the door gently, then I stood there with my hand on the knob, waiting for regret to hit. It didn't. Sadness came. Of course it did. But beneath the sadness was relief, deep, clean relief, like finally shutting off an alarm that had been ringing so long I had mistaken it for normal sound. The aftermath was strange. Sienna did not go quietly at first. Her friends posted vague things. Some men only support empowered women until empowerment includes consequences. Fragile men choose silence because accountability scares them. Never shrink your standards to keep someone comfortable. I knew they were about me. I didn't respond. Responding would have pulled me back into the room I had just exited. Eric messaged me once. Morgan's guy. He wrote, "Man, that dinner was wild. Respect for leaving." I asked if he was okay. He said, "Thinking about some things." That was all. Maybe he left too. Maybe he didn't. Everyone has their own timeline. Sienna tried one more time 2 weeks later. A long email. Not text, email. It was organized, thoughtful, almost painfully self-aware in places. She admitted she had used feminist language to justify contempt. She admitted calling men replaceable had made her feel powerful because she was afraid of being discarded first. She admitted I had been reliable and kind. She said she missed my steadiness. She said my absence had made her apartment feel louder. That line almost got me. Almost. Then she wrote, "I hope we can rebuild once we've both healed. Both." There it was, still symmetrical, still unable to say the damage had not been equal. I replied with 3 sentences. "I appreciate the apology. I hope you keep working through this. I am not interested in rebuilding the relationship." Then I sent it before I could soften it. Months passed. My life did not become exciting. That is important. I didn't suddenly become rich. I didn't find a perfect woman the next week. I didn't transform into some cinematic version of myself. I just became peaceful. I slept better. My blood pressure went down. I started cooking again instead of eating whatever was fastest between emotional emergencies. I took morning walks after night shifts when the city was still half asleep. I fixed my own apartment. A shelf that had been crooked for a year, a leaky shower head, a drawer that stuck, small things. Things I had ignored while using all my energy to keep Sienna comfortable. My friends noticed. One of them, Marcus, said, "You seem less braced." That was exactly it. I had been living like someone waiting for a door to slam. Now the door was just a door. I heard about Sienna through mutual people. She stopped hanging out with Morgan as much. Apparently the replaceable men jokes weren't as funny after the man in her life replaced her with silence. She started therapy, real therapy, not podcast therapy. Someone said she had deleted a few old posts. I didn't check. I hope she changed. I genuinely do. Not because I want her back, because I don't think anyone is happy living behind that much armor. But change after consequence does not erase consequence. That is a lesson people hate. One evening, about 6 months later, I saw her again. Hotel lobby, of all places. She was there for another conference, smaller this time. I was coming out of the service elevator with a toolbox. She was standing near the front desk, checking in. We saw each other at the same time. For a second, the hole passed open between us. Then she smiled. Not the old sharp smile, something softer. "Hi, Daniel." "Hi, Sienna." She looked at the toolbox. "Still saving the building?" "Trying," she nodded. There was a pause. Then she said, You look well. I said, I am. Her eyes flickered. I think that answer hurt a little. Not because she wanted me miserable, maybe because part of her had assumed being without her would leave some visible wound. It hadn't. She said, I'm glad. I believed her, mostly. Then she said, I think about what you said about being removable. I didn't answer. She continued, I hated it at the time. I know. But you were right. That was all. No grand apology, no attempt to reopen anything, just that. You were right. I nodded. Take care, Sienna. You too. I walked past her toward a room with a broken thermostat. That was my job, not fixing her, not anymore. A thermostat made more sense. It either responded or it didn't. People are more complicated. But the principle is not that different. If something keeps overheating, keeps freezing, keeps turning every room uncomfortable, you can spend months adjusting settings. Or you can finally admit the system is bad for the space you're trying to live in. Sienna once told me men were replaceable. She meant it as a threat, a reminder that I should stay anxious, stay grateful, stay aware that my position could be filled by someone else. But she misunderstood something basic. The healthiest replacement for a bad relationship is not always another person. Sometimes it is a quiet apartment, a full night's sleep, a phone that doesn't make your stomach tighten, a meal eaten without being analyzed, a weekend with no tests, a life where nobody calls contempt empowerment. She thought she was competing with other women for my attention. She wasn't. She was competing with peace, and peace did not argue, peace did not explain, peace did not post quotes, peace simply waited for me to notice it was available. Once I did, there was no going back. Because a person who loves you should add warmth to your life, not make calm feel like an upgrade. And if someone keeps reminding you that you're replaceable, eventually the smartest thing you can do is believe them. Not by finding someone better, by finding yourself again, by choosing the quiet, by closing the door gently, and by letting them panic when they realize the thing they mocked was the thing they lost.